About to go today, I'm sorry. I wanted to say welcome. I also wanted to say that this year we're having Shani in the evenings because we have to share her with a Jerusalem job that took her from us from the morning. So it's a chance for those who work in the morning to join us, also for spouse. You know, if you have a husband who was always envious of you being here and him not, so they can come together. And the other thing I wanted to tell you is that because we have to share Shani, you're going to have next week Shiur Chofshi. As in next week Shani is not here, but we thought to have a replacement, and then we discovered that Moatza Mekomit Efrat is bringing on Monday, Tuesday, 8 o'clock next week, Malka Piotrkowski to the Dagan. She's good. We tried to bring her a long time, and this time because it's Chosen, it's Shavua Chosen. They have Rabbi D on Motzei Shabbat. They have a whole host of beautiful programs. Look them up. I can send you their flyer on the group, on this class group, so you can see. So we decided if there's such a big name coming, we're going to have Chofesh for next week, so that we can all go and Lishma et Malka, speaking about Chosen. And then in 2 weeks' time, we'll meet here again.
Malka speaking in Hebrew?
Malka is in Hebrew. I will try and find out if they are Zooming it as well. And if they are, I will ask for the link for this group.
Thank you.
Okay? So, Keilim and Shani, and let the show begin.
Wow. Firstly, before we even begin, Tehillim, and this way enable our Torot to be transformed to Tefillot and our Tefillot to Torot. I want to thank Ayelet and the Women's Beit Midrash of Efrat and the Achsanai, who in this case we moved from over the years, from Dekel to Geffen, and now Mamash, I feel we're going back, exactly, and now back to our roots here in Rimona as Mamash Toda Rabbah. Yes, coming all the way. Excellent. Mitsuyan. So let's begin together. We'll say Ms. Morima, Kuf Chafalif, and Kuf Lamid together. Shir Lama'alot, Asa'inai El Harim, Me'ayin Yabo Ezri Me'im Adonai, Oseh Shamayim Ba'aretz. Al Yitain Lamot Raglacha, Al Yanum Shomracha, Hinei Lo Yanum V'Lo Yishan Shomer Yisrael. Adonai Shomracha, Adonai Tzilcha, Al Yad Yeminacha, Yomam Hashemesh Lo Yakeka V'Yareach Balayla. Adonai Yishmorcha Mikol Ra Yishmor et Nafshecha. Adonai Yishmor et Yitcha Uboacha Me'ata V'Ad Olam. Mizmor Kuf Lamid. Shir HaMa'alot Mima Makim Karaticha Adonai. Adonai Shema V'Koli Tzieno Oznecha Kashuvot L'Kol Tachanunai. Ima Vonot V'Shmor Ya Adonai Mi Ya'mod. Ki Yemcha Haslicha Leman Tevarei. Kivite Adonai Kivtan Nafshi V'Lidvaroch Uchalti. Nafshi l'Adonai mishomrim laboker, shomrim laboker. Yachel Yisrael el Adonai, ki im Adonai hachesed, v'arbe imo fedut, v'hu yitzes Yisrael mikol avonotav. Ezrat Hashem, that our both Tefillot and Torot should serve lahagana, ala chayalim, achzarat hachatufim, l'ripui, kol haptzuim be'ezrat Hashem. And with this, we're going to begin our learning. And it's also, on one hand, a little bit of a change to give shiur at night. On the other hand, going to argue both a phenomenal challenge and an opportunity. And now I see that the clock is there instead of right in front of me. And in my mind, I thought the shiur was from 8 to 9:30. It's only an hour. 8 to 9:15. So I may just go on and on. So someone just tell me, or I'll try to be sensitive indeed to the time, because of the opportunity at night of learning Torah at night. Firstly, Chazal tell us that there's an extra schut of learning Torah at night. It's not only a demonstration of our extra hatmada, of consistency and investment in learning, but it also means that we're taking advantage of these hours where it's true, we generally are a little more tired. Perhaps, some of us just thinking, yes, it's easier to stay at home. Chazal therefore say that the learning that's done at night is not only an expression of greater Mesirut Nefesh, but it also means that you actually retain it much more, explain Chazal, and that the learning is a much more, I guess one can argue, even an efficient type of learning, because it requires of us to come out and to exert ourselves a little more. So a tremendous yasher kochachem. I must say that there were a few women who had written me or called to let me know that they're terribly sorry, the nights don't work for them as well, and they're going to miss. And I said, that it's right between the Eliyahu stories and the Elisha stories. And they said, no, Shani, it's about, we're not going to be part of this group and the dynamic anymore. And I realized that that's really so much of what's been created over the years. So firstly, tremendous hakarat hatov for all those of you who continued from basically Wednesday mornings, switching to Tuesday nights. You're being makdimot, by the way, right? Showing that we want to already get the learning in on a Tuesday night. And at the same time, I just want to also express tremendous hakarat hatov for all the new faces that sometimes have said over the years, Shani, we can't come on mornings. We're very busy with the mornings. And to now see you here at night is really both a tremendous kavod, extremely heartwarming and encouraging as well. And with this, we're going to get straight to our learning. And even as I teach, people sometimes ask, how do you have the koach to teach? And I say, firstly, it's always easier to be the teacher than to be the student. Secondly, it's just energy that I feel from you and obviously from the words of the Torah. So I hope that you're going to also share in the enthusiasm and the energy that we create as we learn tremendous amount of, I'm going to say, not only messages of leadership, but Sefer Malachim, and particularly the transition from Malachim Aleph to Malachim Bet, is going to teach us a tremendous amount about the dynamics, as you see, of kings and queens, again, many queen stories as well, prophets and priests. Basically, we're going to try to pay attention to the message of Malachim. And just to remind you, as I do as the introduction to Tanakh every year, namely putting every Sefer of Tanakh in its proper both historical context and textual context. So as we begin in its textual context, we know that we're learning what Chazal generally call Nevi'im Rishonim, and not to confuse it with what we consider today Nevi'im Rishonim versus Nevi'im Achronim, because according to Chazal, all the Nevi'im Rishonim are all those prophets who lived during the time period of the first Beit HaMikdash, including Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, Yechazkel, Treyasar. According to Chazal, there are only 3 Nevi'im Achronim, only 3 later prophets who continue through the time period of the Second Commonwealth, namely Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. It's really only due to the printing press of the 16th century in Italy, where they simply could not publish the Radak's Perush on all of Nevi'im Rishonim. So where did they decide to separate it? From the end of Malachim, and therefore they call that Perush Haradak al Nevi'im Rishonim. Everything automatically became Nevi'im Achronim, but truth is that part of the reason that this mistaken concept has stuck is because it really is consistent with a different genre. The Nevi'im Rishonim, as we see through Sefer Malachim, are really more of a historiographical recording of messages of Nevuah. By that I mean that these are prophetic messages, which going back to the tripartite division of Tanakh, as opposed to the words of Torah, which are direct messages of God transcribed by Moshe Rabbeinu, as opposed to the words of Ketuvim, which at least understood by the Rambam, are words of divine inspiration of respective authors. The works of Nevi'im Rishonim are the words of the Nevi'im themselves, based on messages of Hashem that they process, and they're going to, already starting really from Sefer Dvarim, we see that there are different styles that they're going to employ in broadcasting religious messages. One of the primary methods is going to be historiography. In other words, recording different events historically in order to share with us religious messages. Just to give an example of this, right? Even today, if we had Nevi'im writing down the events of Melchemet Charvot HaBarzel today, right? Everyone see that? I don't know if a Navi would necessarily try to include all the different military missions that are being executed right now in Lebanon and Gaza. Rather, what type of messages would the Navi tell us? He would go back to October 7th, probably. He would go back before October 7th, and the Navi would speak about judicial reform and predominantly the lack of unity that was so manifest during that time. And right afterwards, he would write about October 7th, and then the ensuing unity, right? Everyone see this? Now, that's not necessarily a historically, even politically accurate account, but is that a religious message that's very evident as you revisit these historical events? And that's why this is known as historiography. We're going to use the writing of history as the backdrop, the setting for the Navi to deliver religious messages. And therefore, this is an extremely important point because very often we're going to ask ourselves, wow, he's going to describe the war against Aram. I would love to know what military tactics they used. Again, what was the strategy in their victory? And the answer is going to be the Navi omits it. He's only going to be sharing with us certain selective facts because his goal is not to share with us military strategy, nor even historical accuracy, but rather to teach us religious messages. And therefore, we're going to consistently revisit this question. What is the Navi trying to teach us? What message is going to be extrapolated from the information that's given? Which obviously then is going to enable us to focus not only on what the Navi says, but how he says it, and what he chooses to tell us, what details are going to be included, what perhaps is omitted, and this is going to be the platform for all of our shiurim. So now we're going to take a look, not at the beginning of Sefer Melachim Bet yet, but we're actually going to revisit Melachim Aleph, exactly where we left off. So this will serve as a little bit of chazara for those who were even at the very last shiur where we connected Eliyahu stories to Chorba and Yerushalayim. Do you remember this? And Har Chorev. So we're basically going to continue again from the Har Carmel, Har Chorev scene and onward, albeit the focus of the various prophetic narratives that we're going to be learning together this year are in fact going to be Melachim Bet. Now this in itself is really a very strange division because in the text of Nevuah, it's not Melachim Aleph and Melachim Bet, rather this is called Sefer Melachim, which is very aptly called as such because it begins, do you remember the beginning of Melachim Aleph from last year and even the year before? Then the transition of the Malchut from David to Shlomo, and very soon thereafter, already by Perek Yud Bet, the division, the Piluk HaMelucha, and the Malchei Yehuda and Malchei Yisrael. And I already prepared copies for you of beautiful charts of all Malchei Yehuda and Malchei Yisrael, but for pedagogic purposes, I do not want to hand them out until I find that people are losing track of the various kings, because otherwise you use it as a crutch and you don't really allow the stories to come to life because you're just thinking of the timeline. So I hope that's okay. When I feel that we need it, then they'll be ready to go. But at the same time, it makes sense to begin the stories of Sefer Melachim. Just like Sefer Shmuel, albeit one could argue Shmuel Aleph focuses more on Shaul, but then we have the transition to David. David, the end of Shaul, at the end of Sefer Shmuel Aleph, really is then recorded again at the beginning of Shmuel Bet. And therefore, why do we have the division of Shmuel Aleph, Shmuel Bet, Melachim Aleph, Melachim Bet, so much so that if we open up Bava Batra, if we open up the Amoraim, and we see the process of canonization, it's never called Shmuel Aleph, Shmuel Bet, Melachim Aleph, Melachim Bet. Rather, these are writings associated, the entire writings and collection of prophecies are associated respectively with Shmuel and his Talmidim, and then Sefer Melachim, collected and compiled and edited by Yirmiyahu Hanavi. So where did this division come from? Believe it or not, it dates back as early as the 1st century CE, or I should argue the 1st century BCE, where Ptolemy, who is one of the generals who succeeded Alexander the Great, is in control over the land of Israel, and this is the beginning of the process of Hellenization that we're all very familiar with. And he basically, I was going to say coerced the members of Sanhedrin to translate the Torah. Right? The Gemara records this as in Gemara Avodah Zarah as one of the darkest days of the year in Chodesh Tevet, when the Torah was translated for the first time into the Greek language, otherwise known as the Septuagint, the Targum HaShivim. What's interesting is that they didn't just translate the words of the Torah, but also Nevi'im and Ketuvim. And in the translation, the Septuagint appears as, it's called the 4 books of Melachim, what are the 4 books of Malachim? Basically, Shmuel Aleph, Shmuel Bet, Malachim Aleph, Malachim Bet. Why are they really all 4 books of Malachim? Shaul, David, and then from Shlomo and on. So it really began with the Septuagint, and then we find, even though the Amoraim try to put it back as one Sefer, we see that over time, everyone recognized that there was a division, and again, the Amoraim who explicitly spoke about how Sefer or Sifrei Shmuel are written by Shmuel and his students, so at least let's keep that as a different work than the works of Malachim. So even though they're 2 separate works, they still maintained this tradition of a division between the Malachim of Shmuel Aleph versus Shmuel Bet, because who really is the focus of Shmuel Aleph? Shaul. Who's the focus of Shmuel Bet? Excellent. And then the question is, how about the difference between Malachim Aleph and Malachim Bet? Because what we're going to learn is we're going to see and explore the stories, excuse me, not just of Achav the king, but also of Eliyahu Hanavi, followed by Elisha Hanavi. And obviously, our upcoming shiurim are going to compare and contrast these Nevi'im and their remarkable stories, and the Nevi'im writing this very, very sensitive to both the comparisons and the contrast, the consonants and the dissonance. But with all of this, we have to ask, this is strange, because the Eliyahu stories actually continue in Malachim Bet. So what's the reason? Not only that, you may argue, okay, yes, the Navi stories continue, but technically the king stories don't continue. In other words, it's Sefer Malachim. So Malachim Aleph ends with which king? Achav. And Malachim Bet begins with Achav's son, Achaziah. However, this in itself is very confusing because that's the king of Yisrael. But guess what? It's the same king of Yehudah, namely Yehoshaphat. So sorry, this doesn't work that well. So we have to ask, Todah Rabah, we have to ask ourselves, why is it that Chazal, very sensitive to the division here, trying to, on one hand, maintain a unity of the Sfarim, why did they allow for this division to continue? So this is a question that we're going to have to revisit, but Ezrat Hashem, as we begin Malachim Bet, I'm not debating whether or not to already give you the answer so that you can sleep. No, that's right. I'm going to whet your appetite and also pique your curiosity for all sorts of inquiring minds who want to take a look at the beginning of Malachim Bet. So instead of giving you an answer, I'm going to give you a hint. If you look at the beginning of Malachim Bet, you can't help then but go back to the beginning of Shmuel Bet. The beginning of Shmuel, really Shmuel Aleph, Shmuel Bet, but even more, Malachim Aleph. Meaning there seems to be a very conscious decision to maintain this division so that we'll take a look at the beginning of Malachim Bet and compare it back to primarily Malachim Aleph. So that's your own homework assignment, and you have 2 weeks for this. So let's take a look back at the stories of Eliyahu Hanavi. So we're going to learn it, albeit we will pay attention to this division of the Septuagint and the maintenance of this division by Chazal. But at the same time, we're also, from the perspective of the prophets, we're basically going to revisit and continue the stories of Eliyahu from where we left off, really, from the end of Perek Yud-Chet and the beginning of Perek Yud-Tet. So Be'ezrat Hashem, again, this pamphlet is really what I call more the introductory pamphlet to the transition to Malachim Bet. But we're going to look at the stories, and obviously we're not meant to fully appreciate the transition to Malachim Bet or to Elisha Hanavi until we revisit the introductory prakim. So we began last year with the introduction of Eliyahu, who, as opposed to the other Nevi'im, and who not only at times do we find out about their hakdasha, their actual inauguration as a Navi, but we also hear some background information of the Navi, more or less, where he's from, again, his father's name. What's ironic about Eliyahu is that he just appears literally from the middle of nowhere, and all we know about him is that he's Eliyahu HaTishbi, which in itself doesn't really say much, because it could be that Tishbi really is an area, no, not the wine press, but Again, or it could really just be he's a toshav. He literally is a nomad from the areas of the Transjordan, then from the Gilad, which tells us a little bit about his personality, because everyone we know so far from the Gilad, Machir HaGiladi, from the tribe of Menashe, Yiftach HaGiladi, what's the common denominator? They're all very strong conquerors. Okay, Eliyahu may not be a strong conqueror, but he definitely has that belligerent personality of a Giladi, and we don't hear his father's name. In other words, he's not a Navi ben Navi. He wasn't trained by his father. It really does seem that he appears from the middle of nowhere, and his name in itself depicts many of the themes that he's going to address, namely that Yud Kei Vav Kei, that the God of Am Yisrael is not just the God of Am Yisrael, he is Elokim, Hashem hu ha-Elokim, Eliyahu. Elokim is the Yud Kei Vav Kei God. And this is why he cannot tolerate, during the time of Achav, who marries Izebel, who we already saw in the background, is juxtaposed to the story of Chiel from Beit El, who rebuilt the city of Yericho as a demonstration of literally graffitiing the memorial of Am Yisrael, because the city of Yericho is meant to serve as a constant monument for Am Yisrael's recognition that we're only here in Eretz Yisrael because of the miracles of God. And as soon as the city is rebuilt, that's basically undermining that sense of the godliness and the hashkacha of Eretz Yisrael. No, Chiel says, Kochi b'otzem yadi asali et hachayil hazeh, even if it means that my oldest son, my youngest son, they're all going to be killed off, it's worth it. And that's the background for understanding that this is a time period where people are no longer sensitive to the godly state of living in Eretz Yisrael. And this is further underscored by the Achav Izebel alliance, which really is not only a political alliance, but also a cultural alliance by marrying the Phoenician princess. This is the first king who's going to nationalize idolatry. So even though we've heard of his father Omri, who worships the god of Shumar in the middle of Shomron, in the middle of Emek Yisrael, even though we heard of Tivni and Zimri and Basha and Elah, and I'm going backwards to Yeravam ben Nevat, they were worshiping God and also hedging their bets. All of a sudden, Achav, the most notorious king of the Israelite kings, is going to nationalize idolatry. And this Eliyahu doesn't have any tolerance for. We discuss whether or not the machloket amongst the commentators, whether Eliyahu is working in tandem with God or a complete initiator here. Again, when he declares years of famine on the northern kingdom, which continue for 3 years. We saw an interesting three stages of development in the Eliyahu stories, until God says, okay, go to Achav, say, I'm giving rain. No, that's not good enough. This is where we left off. Basically, instead of going directly to Achav, Eliyahu wants to show that, no, and he is not going to kowtow to this idolatrous king. Rather, he first goes to his butler named Ovadiah, who insists that he's an Eved Hashem, and yet Eliyahu criticizes Ovadiah's diplomatic methods of saving, even if it's 100 true prophets, in two caves. Eliyahu is the one to say, well, I'm really the only one still committed to God. Ovadiah tries to tell him, no, I'm just as committed to God, and I'm staying here through diplomacy instead of through zealotry to attempt to work together with the people. And obviously many parallels today, which we're not going to elaborate upon right now. But it's also, if you take a look on the first page, we see that not only is there a dialogue, but really a debate going on with regard to who do you see as your master. Eliyahu consistently accuses Obadiah of, oh, where's your Adon, referring to Achav, and Obadiah consistently calls Eliyahu his Adon and Hashem his Adon. No, I'm committed to God. And therefore, it's interesting to see numerous parallels between Obadiah and the first story of Eliyahu by Nachal Krit, or the parallels between the Obadiah-Eliyahu dialogue and the second story of the widow of Tzarfat. And even, what do you know, the end of that story with the revival of the child, it seems that by the end of the story as well, Eliyahu comes around and is somewhat sensitive to Obadiah, so much so that when Obadiah says, wait a second, if I go to call the king, right, not my master, you're going to disappear and then he's going to kill me. And Eliyahu insists and comforts him, no, I really will appear before Achav, which when Achav comes, there is another acrimonious dialogue between them. And basically, Obadiah foreshadows the dilemma, but also the resolution. In other words, Am Yisrael as well are going to be somewhat on the fence with regard to who do they see as their Adon. Is it Baal, is it the Canaanite God, or is it Hashem? They're also hedging their bets, and ultimately they come, just like Obadiah, to say, no, Hashem hu ha'elokim. So we asked ourselves last year as well, why does Eliyahu, before bringing the rain, insist that the king move from the central north area of Israel all the way to the northwestern coast of Haifa by the areas of Har Carmel? We discussed not only to challenge Baal in his own territory, basically to bring everyone to a lush area and show how, even over the course of 3 years, the famine obviously has had an effect here, but also to show in the area that you think that the rains, right, the rains coming from the Mediterranean mist and moisture, even in that area, it's not Baal who's the master, but rather Hashem who's the master. Also to show the conflict of cultures. So which flag are you going to put by the Aron Kodesh? Right? Basically, do you associate with the Lebanese, again, or do you associate with Israel? Do you associate with Baal, or do you associate with God? So he brings them particularly to the northwestern border with Lebanon. And at the same time, there's the philological reference to Carmel, which means the lush area, the Kerem of El. But part of the reason as well is because Kerem and Carmel is a term that's always used to show a point of transition, right? The Carmel is the grain when it's not too ripe, and it's also, again, not yet fully ripened. It's somewhere in this amorphous state. That's why in halacha as well, an area that's not a Reshut HaYachid or Reshut HaRabim is called a excellent. Right? Basically, the Carmelite is this very vague zone. What Eliyahu is doing is he's taking them to this very ambiguous zone, and he basically is saying, you decide. I'm bringing you to the gray area, and I'm hoping that you're going to be able to experience and figure out on your own the difference between the black and the white, right? Sometimes we have to recognize that, yes, there are ideas that we think are very vague, and what Eliyahu comes to do is basically bring us from one state to the other, bring us from a state of ambiguity to a state of clarity, and that's exactly what happens in the area of Carmel. And therefore, throughout the whole story, it's very clear that Eliyahu is a choreographer, right? He is consciously, he tells the Nevi'ei Baal, you choose first, you go ahead, and you choose the part that you want. You can go and try to bring the fire down on your own, and that's why Eliyahu unveils his challenge and has them basically lead the show. He knows that obviously the whole half of the day, as they're busy trying to bring fire down from heaven, he allows the Baal to occupy the people's attention deliberately. He mocks not only their dancing, but also the wavering between the two different opinions. He consciously waits until the gray zone, until the time period, also the amorphous time of the day. He brings them to an amorphous place. He chooses an amorphous time. What time is that? Bein Hashmashot. Till he's ready to say, okay, now, during this time period where it's not day anymore and it's not night, and it's not Baal and it's not God, right? The same area of Carmel, right? Not one, not the other. It's right on the border. Which one are you going to choose? At Matayatem Poschem al Shtei HaSeipim, and so many different sources that we explored also in Gemara Shabbat that are built off of this scene in Malachim Aleph Perek Yud Chet. Ultimately, to then have the fire come down from heaven, the people recognize Hashem Hu Elokim. Eliyahu engages not only in manifest actions, but also symbolic actions to show the unity of Am Yisrael, whether it's repairing the Mizbeach with 12 stones, representing the 12 tribes, pouring 12 jugs of water, meaning 4 jugs 3 times, and obviously praying to Hashem all together. And the nation in response is finally now, after not saying anything, after literally being very confused, after lo anu ha'am oto davar, either they didn't answer him or they were so confused. Some of them yelled out, yeah, we believe in God. Some of them yelled out, we believe in Hashem. Now they all say, Hashem hu ha'elokim. And in addition to the people's response following Eliyahu in murdering all the Nevi'ei Baal, it's Achav's response which is most remarkable. And the reason why we're revisiting the scene is not only to remind us of where we left off, but also to begin to explore Achav a little more, right? Because albeit we paid attention last year a lot to the very bombastic personality of Eliyahu HaNavi. We told the story of the prophet, but now it's time to really examine the king and the queen. Achav and Izebel. Izebel, we saw, clearly has not only a strong influence on Achav that we're going to continue to see in the ensuing scene, but it seems that, albeit even Achav's father, as an Oved Avodah Zarah, is not as terrible. It's not going to nationalize Avodah Zarah to the degree that Achav does. And the Navi offers the explanation, and that is that Achav was led astray by his Phoenician princess wife, and saw, because of her influence, saw the marriage not only as a military alliance, but really a cultural and a religious one. At the same time, we see that Achav himself is a very, on one hand, we'll see certain personality traits of immaturity, but also of confusion himself. Right? And here's one very good indication of this, because on one hand, he had told Eliyahu, ata achartanu, you uprooted us, right? You're the one responsible for this drought. You're the one responsible for all this terrible situation. On the other hand, and he seems to stand passively by when Eliyahu orders for the massacre of the 400 Nevi'ei Baal. If anything, the impression that we have is that this is a unified, organized massacre of the prophets, that not only is Achav not resisting, but perhaps even participating, supporting, but these are the ones that the Navi tells us were appointed by his own wife. What does that already tell you about his personality?
He's wishy-washy.
Excellent. He's wishy-washy. In other words, he's okay with having the 400 prophets of his wife completely killed, because maybe he wasn't really so supportive of them replacing the Nevi'im to begin with. Also, we already saw that his primary butler, Obadiah, Asher al-Habayit, manages to save 100 prophets and provide them with food, while Eliyahu is miraculously being provided with food by Hashem by keeping 50 in one cave, 50 in another cave. And albeit, yes, he explains to Eliyahu, this was at the risk of my own life, one does have to wonder if Achav look the other way. That's exactly it. This is right under Achav's nose, meaning his butler is feeding 100 Nevi'im, not just for a day, but apparently this has been going on for 3 years. And maybe Zebel doesn't know, and Achav perhaps really did know about this, and he's not going to exonerate them, but he also won't kill Obadiah for keeping them alive. He'll watch as his wife's prophets, false prophets, are massacred, and at the same time, a remarkable scene when Eliyahu tells Achav, go up and eat and drink because the rain is coming. And this is right after Achav had said, right before the scene, you are the Oker Yisrael, you're the one, literally, you're the traitor. And Eliyahu, who criticized him. Now, Eliyahu turns to Achav and says, okay, now you have a right to eat and drink. Now you should go. And not only that, but when Eliyahu goes up, and then we see, just like he revived the dead boy after 3 attempts, so too after 3 attempts of davening to Hashem, he brings the rain for all of Am Yisrael, but even greater than that, and even more than seeing that, in fact, Eliyahu is the one, just like by the story of the revival of the child, to serve as the emissary of God, so too in this story. But then he accompanies Achav. He literally runs in the rain with his long flying hair, that Superman scene that I described last year, as Achav is in his chariot. And we have a sense that maybe now they can work together, that maybe Achav had a little bit of a change of heart, and the proof is going to be where we left off, really, at the beginning of Perek Yutet. So if everyone can now open up to Melachim Bet Perek Yutet, and we're going to see a little bit more about this very interesting king's personality, because as soon as, Melachim Aleph Perek Yutet, that as soon as he returns home with Eliyahu in the pouring rain, what's the first thing that the Navi records about his response? We look at the Perek and we see that very excitedly he shares with Izebel the events that happens. Now this is what's so remarkable, because he knows his wife, and yet Perek Yutet Pasuk Aleph, Vayaged Achav liIzebel et kol asher asa Eliyahu et kol asher harag et kol haneviyim b'charev. How do you think he tells Izebel the story? Excitingly, right? It's not told like, oh my, do you know what Eliyahu did? It says, wow, do you know what Eliyahu did? Right? That's the tone of the pasuk, which, by the way, and my son sent me, he said that there is a Tanakh teacher who just came out with a version of Tanakh, which basically is all of Tanakh without any vowels. And the challenge is to put your own vowels in, right? Basically, read the pasuk in different ways. What's interesting is that there really are certain pasukim that are open to various interpretation. But then again, like I've tried this a few times with different psukim, there are certain psukim that you just can't read any other way, right? Some of the most famous are in Megillat Esther, right? You can try, right? You can try to read, Mordechai telling Esther, Hacharishi beit hazod, ravach v'atalai yamod liyudim mimakom acher, va'at u'beit avich tovedu. Obviously you can't. He's talking about her potential demise, right? And what's Esther's response? Le'achnos et kol hayudim v'tzumo alai. And what does she say? V'kasher? Exactly. You have to read it how? Kasher, with that tune of Eicha, right? You can try to read it with the tune of Megillat Esther. It doesn't work. It really doesn't. Kasher, avadati, no, that doesn't work. And it really is a tune of Kina, right? The words themselves. So you have to make sure that they really match up.
But it's funny that you went right to Megillat Esther, because this is the whole Haman Zeresh scene.
Oh, 100%.
Coming home, this is what happened. Do you believe this? Do you believe
Beautiful.
And you really
Beautiful.
get that feeling. Even what you said before about Achav standing there and not really responding, it's very Achashverosh in nature as well.
100%.
So the echoes are there, the head
Beautiful.
is there, we're seeing
Excellent.
it.
So we're seeing it, even though where should we really see it?
Here.
Meaning in Megillat Esther.
We should be seeing here.
Beautiful. And I'm so impressed that you already see it here, because the chapter that is most going to resound with allusions with Megillat Esther is going to be in Perek Chaf Aleph. So stay tuned for that, for the story of Kerem Navot. And we're going to see, wow, Mordechai and Esther definitely have an Achav Zevel, conspiracy going on in the back of their minds. No question. Beautiful. So notice that Vayagad, let's even try it. Vayagad Achav liZevel et kol asher asar liyahu, et kol asher harag, et kol haneviyim b'cherev. Exactly. The kol tells you that he's excited. He's excited. Oh my gosh, you should have been there. It was such a fascinating scene. And not only that, if he really just wanted to share with Izebel the massacre of her own hired prophets, then which part should he have left out? That's exactly it. I mean, you don't need to hear about that. He wants to share with her, wow, again, maybe Izebel, maybe like the prophets of Israel, meaning maybe my prophets really are a little better than your prophets. But what's Izebel's response? Vatishlach Izebel malach el Eliyahu lemor, kol yasun elokim b'chol yosifun, ki ka'it machar asim et nafshecha kenefesh achat mehem. She sees how excited and to a certain degree the upper hand that Achav has, not only over her, but over the entire culture of Yisrael at this point, and therefore she has to nip this in the bud, which also is a reflection of another side of Achav's personality. On one hand, he really does appreciate and respect the Nevi'ei Hashem. On the other hand, he's so intimidated by Izebel. Is that interesting? Not by Izebel's philosophy, right? It's not as if he's really confused religiously. Rather, one of the themes that we've seen starting from Sefer Shmuel is the popular support versus the divine support. So clearly Achav leans to the popular support theory.
What about the word Machar? You already brought the connection.
Beautiful. And Esther.
Machar is the Amalek word.
100%. And a part of what she wants to say is, okay, Eliyahu, you think you did something truly remarkable and changed around the entire zeitgeist of the country, and just wait till tomorrow. Basically, what does she know? Well, give it to tomorrow, meaning not just for Eliyahu, but for Achav and all of Am Yisrael. In other words, if she would try to kill him that day, what do you think would happen? There would be a protest. However, she waits till tomorrow. What happens to that remarkable fascination and excitement about the beeper miracle? Right, you forgot about that? Do you remember the beeper miracle? And, okay, but can you imagine? Some people forgot about it. No. Okay, good. Tanya, kol hakavod, right? We can't forget about it. Exactly, especially after 18 soldiers are killed, right? It wanes a little. So Izabel says, just wait till tomorrow. And sure enough, and then you're going to end up just like one of my prophets, meaning I'm going to massacre you in retaliation. And Achav cowers away. Now, Pasuk Gimel, Vayar, Vayakam, Vayelech el nafsho, Vayavo be'er Shaba asher liYehuda. So notice that he's a king of Yisrael, which we already discussed also in our introduction of all of the Malachim post Piluk HaMelucha. Then in the northern part of the country, the messaging, the religious messaging is going to be very different than the messages taking place down south. When Am Yisrael are iniquitous in Yehuda, what will the Navi always say? What is going to be the direct response? Lack of rainfall. In the north, what is always the response? A foreign invader, because that's where most of the Mesopotamia living in the Fertile Crescent, that's where most of the up-and-coming empires and obviously the strong armies are going to come from, unless the issue of rain by virtue of the fact that we have so many natural ma'ayanot and aquifers up in the north. And therefore, Eliyahu basically says, I can't tell them anymore about any invasions coming from the north. Why not? They have an alliance with the north. Excellent. And I can't tell them about rain anymore because I brought that just now. So basically he says, my only recourse is to run away. And I'm going to run away to Yehuda. Now what we're going to see is that even in Yehuda, he's going to claim that no one is really so allegiant to God anymore either. But at least in Yehuda, they have a better chance of listening, of being influenced. Why? 2 reasons. The Beit HaMikdash and rain. Right here, because of the geological makeup of the land and obviously the altitude of the mountains. So you cannot dig down to the aquifers in most places of Yehuda. You really are dependent on the rain.
How are they able to pass through from the north to the south?
Beautiful. So they
There
can't
were
as...
barriers, there's no entrance.
Excellent. So as groups you can, but a one person.
One person can just slide through.
Exactly. So he comes all the way to Be'er Sheva Asher Yehuda. And I quickly alluded to this in the last year that we had, that who else starts their story, right, their journey from Be'er Sheva? Avraham Avinu, on his way to the Akedah. So what we're going to see that there are also allusions here to the Akedah story, in which case we have to ask ourselves, who's sacrificing whom, right? That obviously is what's going to come to question. So let's take a look. And Vayar Vayakam Vayelech el nafsho Vayavo Be'er Sheva asher liYehuda Vayanach et Na'aro Sham. What does he remind you of? Vayakam. This is all. Everyone say this is Rishit. That is now all the actual the same Rikus Pa'alim. Meaning, as you're reading this, especially because it's 8:45 at night, you're wondering, wait, I think I'm hearing Akedah. No, you are definitely hearing Akedah, not just because of the hour. V'uhalach b'midbar derech yom. Vayavo vayeshev tachat rotem achad vayishal et nafsho lamut. Now you're all thinking there's another story, but we don't know that story yet, and that is the Yonah story. The Yonah story is built off of this story, but note though that we already have a sense, wait a second, it's coming under a tree, beautiful. You also have a little bit of the Ishmael story of not only the Na'ar, but also the whole concept of going in the Midbar And now Vayishal Nafsho Lamut also, so there was Midbar Shur, but close enough.
Didn't it leave Beersheba from, wasn't
He sends him also from Beersheba, Yafeh, Vayishal Nafsho Lamut. But now back to the Akedah, we realize who's sacrificing whom? He's sacrificing himself. Why?
There's nothing else to do.
Thank you. For the same reason that we see that Yonah is willing to sacrifice himself and be thrown overboard, because he believes that there's a stronger message in his death than in his life. Just like by the Akedah, what's the message of sacrificing his son? And that's exactly the illusion that Eliyahu has over here. I'm going to show my allegiance to God. Exactly. That's exactly what Eliyahu is saying. I'd rather, we're going to see it in his words, I'd rather show my allegiance to God and die because of my allegiance to God than and have to put up with this iniquitous people or be killed by Avodah Zarah Izebel. Excellent. Vayomer, Rav Ata Hashem Kach Nafshi, Ki Lo Tov Anochi Me Avotai. And who do you think he's referring to? Because I'm not better than definitely Avraham Avinu, Yafem Ma'od. There's also the allusion to, as we're going to see, comparisons with Moshe Rabbeinu, but until this moment, definitely more Akedah. Vayishkav vayishan tacharot machad v'nei ze malach nogea bo. And we're going to see two malach stories also, reminiscent of, back to, Yishmael and Hagar, but even more, also the Akedah. The malach calls out twice, do you remember that? And both times, what is the point of the malach? The first time the malach calls out Avraham, al tishach yadcha lanar, al ta'as lo mu'uma. And the second time, meaning the first time is to tell Avraham what not to do. The second time is after Avraham, beautiful, after Avraham sacrificed the ayil, the malach then comes back and says, wow, now for the future, you're going to have the land and you're going to have an entire legacy of a nation. Beautiful. Eliyahu goes to sleep thinking that what will happen? He's in the midbar. He will die. That's right. And we already know, what is this malach going to do? In other words, Eliyahu, don't kill yourself. Yafeh. So definitely back to that scene a little and saying, go back, right, to Sarah Giverta, even if you don't like it. So there are, we'll call it all the revelation of Malach to in the Abraham stories. But here we also see, no, I'm going to get up and save your life. There's what to eat. Sure enough, in the middle of the midbar, there's mirashotav, ugat v'tzapim v'tapachat mayim. So yes, on one hand, reminiscent of the Hagar scene, who found the be'er. On the other hand, reminiscent still of beautiful by the ravens. Vayocha vayesh vayashav. Abraham, beautiful, many, right? Abraham stories here, right? Basically saying, Eliyahu, you think you're Abraham. If you think you're Abraham and you're so allegiant to God, so why specifically all these allusions to the Abraham stories? What does he want to say? Abraham lived in a culture of Avodah Zarah. And can you imagine Avraham Avinu? Do you think there were numerous opportunities for Abraham to just raise that white flag and say, God, like, this is too tough, right? I cannot change an entire world around me. You know, I'm trying to be an iconoclast, but it's too hard, right? Here, not Abraham.
Because of stone. If he was willing to fight for Rashaim so strongly, then how would he ever come to that conclusion?
Kol hakavod. That's exactly it. Meaning that's why the Navi writing the story is writing it with the Avraham stories, basically saying, Eliyahu, and you think you're like Avraham, but you're so not, because Avraham would never give up. He would never give up. And look at the effects of Abraham, right? Which, if we just reflect upon this just for a moment, I think about Abraham almost every day now, when you think, okay, when are we going to just get our act together and finally, like, really be unified? And is it with every shiur? That's why I have to mention this, right? That whatever it is that we do, is it really going to have an effect? What's the answer? Yes. That none of us can give up. We can't give up. We just have to keep learning, keep davening, keep trying. and keep going to Kikara Chatufim and Mamash to more challah bakes, whatever it may be. Vayashav Vayishkav Vayashav Malach Hashem Shenit. Again, the exact same terminology as we have by the Akedah. Now, what would you expect? Wait a second, why does the Malach come the second time? By Avraham Avinu, what did Avraham do after the first time? He could have gone home to Beersheba. Instead, what did he do? And I'm going to sacrifice. If it's not my son, then it should be something else. God didn't schlep me all the way over here for no reason. Please remember that. God didn't schlep me here for no reason. And that's why Abraham sacrifices the ayil over there. And then the Malach says, yay, yay. Here, after the first time that the Malach says, come on, Eliyahu, don't die, al tishlach yadcha el atzmacha, right? Don't kill yourself. Here's miraculous food. What would we have expected of Eliyahu? What should he do now? Get up and go back and try again, right? If at first you don't succeed. That's exactly it. That's why there's also that illusion of Hagar could be oppressed by her Gevira. Then come on, Eliyahu, you can handle Achav and Izev a little. Again, but here instead, what did Eliyahu do? He went to sleep. So the Malach comes and says, okay, come on. Yafeh. This happens to Yonah, but we don't know the Yonah story yet. Meaning when we get to Yonah, then we realize, oh my, wow, he's Eliyahu take two, which Chazal say he really is. He's the son of the Isha Tzarfatit. Vayeshta, so he says to him, Kum echol, ki rav mimcha haderech. Thank you. Rav mimcha haderech. What does he mean by that? Rav mimcha haderech. Get up, eat some more because you have a lot of work to do. Rav mimcha haderech, which has a double connotation. Literally, you have a long way to go. Geographically, where does he want him to go? Mitzuyan. Rav mimcha. It is Rav mimcha. Just like in the story of Korach, we find that word Rav mikem. And but here, what the Malach is saying is, it is Rav mimcha haderech. Firstly, you have a very long way to go, meaning you have to go all the way back up north. So I just want to make it very clear that even though it doesn't say go back up north, it's clear that is he supposed to continue down south? No, because Rav mimcha haderech. In addition, he is telling him, Rav mimcha haderech. Is it a long journey? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it even is greater than you, Eliyahu. Your job is not. You're not going to solve all the problems right now, but you can do something, right? So do whatever it is that you can do. Rav mimcha haderech. Vayakam vayachol vayishteh. And now we're all excited. Vayelech b'koach hachila hahi. And now he's going to go. Arba'im yom, arba'im laila. Wow, I guess it really was a long. But thank you very much. Ad. Thank you. I was waiting for you all to say this week's parsha. Kol hakavod. Again, Ad har ha'elokim chorev. Now, please keep this in mind. That Rav mimcha haderech was a reference to go up north. Instead, what does Eliyahu do? He goes further south to 40 days. Now, by the way, can we just have, if he's in Beersheba, does it take 40 days and 40 nights to go there? No. To go to Har Sinai? No. Can anyone remember Sefer Devarim? And how long does it take? This is with 3.5 million people. 11 days. 11 days from Har Sinai to get to the southern borders of Eretz Yisrael. So it's not 40 days and 40 nights. And in a very similar vein, that it doesn't really take 3 days to get from Beersheba to Yerushalayim for the Akedah, which is a beautiful depiction of the significance of time in Tanakh. Because you already know from this week's Parsha, what is the significance of 40 days and 40 nights? It's rebirth, it's metamorphosis, which is why, and why is it significant that Moshe Rabbeinu is atop of Har Chorev for 40 days and 40 nights? Also the depiction of a metamorphosis. There's going to be a remarkable transition in the religious, philosophical, not only nomenclature, but the entire phenomenology of this Am Segula, right? That's the idea of anytime you see 40 days and 40 nights, we're going to see an entire metamorphosis. Basically, Eliyahu metamorphosizes over the next 40 days. Now I keep thinking of Kafka, right? And what does he look like now? So you don't have to worry. Again, he's still Eliyahu, but he has changed over the course of these 40 days and 40 nights. And now we're going to see in just a moment that this is a very conscious decision of his not to listen to the malach and to try again, but instead to run away. To run away to Har Chorev. And we're going to see that it really is about running away to Har Chorev, which to a certain degree shouldn't surprise us. Because until now, each one of the stories, each one in 3 stages, if you remember, and we're going to see that consistently here as well, each one of the Eliyahu stories takes place on a different border of Eretz Yisrael. When he first declared, do you remember Hashem says, Lech mizeh, to which direction?
East.
Go to the east. So first story, he is on the east, right, back in the areas of Gilad. Then he's by Sarfat, north, right, Lebanon. Then he took everyone to Har HaKarmel, the western border. There's only one more place for him to go. And this is what we would call a demonstration of active resistance. In other words, what is Eliyahu demonstrating? I really don't want to be with you, right? Basically, again, both to show how he's running away from the people, but it's actually a stronger message than that. It's not just running away from them to a certain degree like Yonah. Again, will instead of going northeast to Nineveh, he'll go southwest all the way to Tarshish. But there's another active resistance over here. His primary point is to God, to basically say the people don't deserve to live in Eretz Yisrael. Really, where should they be going? Either to the east or to the north, or to the west or to the south, God. So Eliyahu now is metamorphosizing and basically making a very conscious decision. I'm not going to work with the people. I'm going to run away to Har Chorev.
Maybe he
So-
wants to be Abraham to create a new nation in Har HaChorev.
Mitsuyan. So that is a very interesting theory, but that's not what Abraham would do. What would Abraham do? He would go back to the people. He's always tzaddikim betoch ha'ir, right? He would be with the people. He never runs away from people, right? Even in the story, or especially in the story of Sdom, as opposed to Eliyahu. And it's not just that he's an introvert, right? He doesn't seem, he really is an extrovert, but
He's opposed.
he's opposed to the people. Bediuk. So now the question is, why run to Chorev? Now, in the stories of Sefer Shemot, Har Chorev is sometimes called Har Chorev, but it's also called Sinai. Here, consistently, it will be called Har Chorev, because what's going on in Eliyahu's mind before we even see the dialogue between him and Hashem on Har Chorev? What's he thinking? Destruction. He's thinking Chorba. He has one idea in his mind, and that is the people have to be destroyed. The land has to be destroyed. Again, that's it.
And that ends on that. Keep going.
Okay, nachon. I was debating whether or not to tell the story, but again, we have a very learned Talmidah Chachama, Mrs. Shaum, right over here, Ken, who had a question. You sure? Okay, Beseder Gamor.
I was just going to say that he went to Chorev needed to be inspired, like to
Yafeh, right, to have this nevuah. So, meaning right now, we're not sure why he's going to Chorev. So we have all these ideas. He wants to receive nevuah, right? He's metamorphosized into an even greater zealot than he was before. He wants Am Yisrael destroyed. What's another possibility? Let's face everything.
Why didn't he go to Beit HaMikdash, though, if he wanted the loftiness and God?
Beautiful.
Why would you run to the south?
Why would you run all the way to the south? Not only that, beautiful. So he wants an epiphany with God, like Moshe, right? He just wants an epiphany.
Moshe was also the person who asked Rachamim on Yisrael.
Mitsuyan, I was waiting for someone to say this. So far we have an epiphany, or destruction, or Rachamim. What happens on Har Sinai? He davens, and that's what Hashem revealed with the Yukamu Mitzot Rachamim. Maybe Eliyahu has transformed into a Baal HaRachamim. Pretend you don't know the story, okay? And now maybe he really wants to go back for the last opportunity to ask for salvation for the
Maybe he
nation.
hasn't transported. Maybe he knows that he's lacking that.
Maybe he is running away because he
knows that-
wants.
When I don't have sablanut.
Beautiful. Like when we discussed last year, the Lech Mizeh, that Hashem says, wait a second, Eliyahu, you need some rehabilitation, right? You can't stay here with the people if you're going to be punishing them left and right. So you have to see what it's like when people are living in a state of drought. Yafeh ma'od, yafeh. But we also saw the Radak says no. And okay, Eliyahu, this is what you did. Now people are going to die. Lech mizeh, right? I want you to stay alive because, yes, you really are on my side. Okay, even though we have all these positive positive associations and even anticipation. Maybe it really is a religious epiphany, maybe it's rachamim. Again, the consistent usage of the word chorev is the Navi's way of putting destructive terminology and connotations into our heads. But you're all right, we have no idea right now for sure why Eliyahu is running to Chorev. But don't worry, we're not going to end here. We're not going to end here because, Gana, this is exactly what we're going to take a look at right now. Gana, firstly, we asked, how could it even be that Har Carmel was forgotten so quickly? And the idea of recognizing that sometimes when we have a chavaya, when we have a one-time experience, an ephemeral moment, unfortunately the experience wears off. But now the question comes to why Chorev? And it's not just our question, but take a look now at Pasuk Tet. Vayavel Sham El HaMe'ara. And he goes to the cave, literally the cleft in the rock with a capital the, right? What is the Ma'ara? Wait a second. We know that there was a cleft in the rock. And don't worry, we're going to see all these psukim inside. In Shmot Perek Lamed Gimel, at the time, just as Ayelet mentions, of the revelation of the 13 attributes of mercy of Yigam Lamidot Rachamim, Hashem had commanded Moshe to stand where? It doesn't say the term Ma'ara, but it says Nikrat Hatzur, which literally is a cleft in the mountain. So over the course of, one can argue, the 500 years between Moshe Rabbeinu and Eliyahu HaNavi, what was initially a cleft in the rock is now a cave, right? Makes 100% sense.
You don't think it's like where the snow was for the revelation, if you're going to go that way again? Or
Because Sne and Ma'ara aren't so much related, but
no, where the
a
snow was
cleft of the
Boer,
rock.
I thought that was like
Yafeh, but we're going to see.
So maybe this is the Me'ara where you saw the snow Boer.
But the Sne, Boer Ba'esh, right, it seems that it was somewhere in the
So
Midbar.
maybe they're putting it in Har Chorev.
Yes, no, Chazal do. Chazal say that it was by Har Chorev,
So if it
but
all
we never
started
find
with the Sne
Ma'arav.
and Me'ara for Moshe, he's visiting it.
Yafeh, but I would say a stronger association with a Ma'ara would be with a cleft in the rock rather than a burning bush. So exactly, that's an Ikrat Hatzur. Vayalan Sham v'hinei dvar Hashem elav vayomer lo malacha po Eliyahu. In other words, the Navi wants to tell us that that's exactly it. We're still unsure. What are you doing here, Eliyahu? The Malach told you to do what? Go back to the people. Rav Mimcha HaDerech, that's a derech that you're on. What are you doing here? And Rita wanted to say,
I just wanted to just bring another connection with Moshe. He was on Sinai for 40
Beautiful.
days and 40 nights without eating.
That
And
meaning.
by the strength of that meal that
Eliyahu has.
he was able to go 40 days and 40 nights.
Exactly.
without
So now
eating.
it's without eating, meaning he's revisiting Moshe Rabbeinu's experience, which seemingly is alluding to an epiphany as well, right? Perhaps. But it's not clear. Why? Because Hashem even implores of Yirmiyahu, Malacha po Eliyahu. Now, really, there are two questions here. We shouldn't just read it as Malacha po Eliyahu. Eliyahu, what are you doing here? How else should you read it? Malacha po Eliyahu. Eliyahu, why are you here? So let's even examine that question first. Why does God have to ask him, why is he there? What's Hashem basically saying by asking it that way? Even if there's a reason to come here, it's not, Hashem is already saying, it's not a good enough reason for you. This isn't your place. Where is your place? You're in the north. You are now in exactly the opposite direction. And what are you doing here? Right? Isn't that, by the way, that's a very, I would say, uncomfortable question. It's like, Kamsa Bar Kamsa, what are you doing here, right? You're not supposed to be at this party. Eliyahu, even if this is a place of religious revelation, this isn't for you. And Eliyahu, what are you doing here? Meaning, out of all places for you to run away and not do what you're supposed to do, why did you come here? So notice that before we take a look at the Parshanim, we'll just end with Eliyahu's own answer. Vayomer, Kano kineti laHashem. He says, because I am zealous for God. So he seems to be answering which question? Excellent. Why are you here? Exactly. I am here because I'm really zealous for you. In other words, again, you, God, Elokei Tzvaot, ki azvu britcha b'nei Yisrael. And why am I here? I'm here to remind you, God, that your people, Yisrael, have left your Brit. Which Brit? Remember this Brit? Guess what, Hashem? The entire people have abandoned the Brit. Now this place is actually perfect for me because I am the only one allegiant to your Brit. I am zealous for your Brit. I'm coming back to the original place of the covenant. And in the meantime, they're all destroying your altars. They're all killing your neviim. Vivater ani levadi. Back to Malacha. What are you doing here? I'm the only one. Wait a second. Wait. Sorry. Time out. Why does that bother us? I'm the only one who's still allegiant. We just had an entire dialogue between. Exactly. Wait a second. Everyone who said Hashem Elokim there, and they just killed the Nevi'ei Baal. Exactly. They're not
I knew
allegiant.
this was coming also because when it said before, it says Lo Tov, and right away I said Lo Tov Adam Hayot
Beautiful.
Levado.
And he
So
says, I'm
that's the
Levad.
beginning of the scene, then it's going to
Beautiful.
continue saying, I'm standing all alone, baby.
Beautiful.
'Cause that's what he
Beautiful.
feels.
Exactly. That's really what he feels. So even though we're saying, wait, but Ovadia just showed you that he sees you and God is his Adon, and he's been hiding 100 Nevi'ei Hashem. So you're not alone, Eliyahu, but exactly what Tanya said. It doesn't make a difference, right? Quantitatively, how many are there? Eliyahu is expressing what he feels. Right? God, I'm doing this all alone. Even if I'm not the only one allegiant to you, I'm the only one working on this. Right? It's just too much. It's too much. Right? No, God. And that's why Ivater ani levadi, I'm alone, and therefore I'm coming to this place that represents not only the Brit, but what else is he trying to say? I'm coming to the place that represents not only where the Brit started, but where it was supposed to end. What's he reminding God of? Do you remember this Brit? This Brit says that you're an Elkanah. Remember, Poked Avonavot, Albanim, Al Shlishim, Arabeim, Lesonai, Lo Tasa L'chol Chol Pesel V'chol Tmuna. God, what am I doing here? What I'm doing here is reminding you that this is the place of your kin'ah. Right? I'm the one protecting your zealotry. You're supposed to be zealous for whom? For yourself. You're supposed to have a zero tolerance for Avodah Zarah. So instead of asking me what I'm doing here, what is Eliyahu basically saying? Exactly. God, I'm here to remind you what you're supposed to be doing. Again, which is what? Destroying Am Yisrael. That's what you said as an Elkanah. Vivater ani levadi. How do we know that he's telling God, destroy Am Yisrael? Vivakshu et nafshi lekachta. Because they want to kill me. So I am here not only to save my life, I am here so that you will kill those who are trying to kill me. So now,
But how does that make sense with him almost taking his own life?
basically to
2
show how
minutes
he's
ago-
allegiant
2
to
minutes
God.
ago, you told me not to take my own life. I didn't take my own life.
Oh, but he wanted to. The only reason he didn't was because the Malach gave
Because
him.
Mom stopped me. So now
Exactly.
I'm here standing before you, but I don't even want to be here. You're supposed to kill them and leave it with me, but I don't even want to be here.
Exactly.
So who are you left with?
Exactly. Basically, Eliyahu, Tanya, you said it beautifully, is really providing God with
And now,
an ultimatum. Either kill me or
then
kill them. And Eliyahu seems to be pretty confident that what will God do? God will save him and kill everyone else.
But again, this
And
exact
then we'll see
opposite
this.
of Moshe Rabbeinu.
Kol
Because he
hakavod.
says to God, you can't destroy the people. We have a breed.
Kol hakavod.
Don't make a
Which
nation
is
out of me.
why,
It's the exact opposite.
exactly, and God, and that's why God turns to Eliyahu again and says, so Eliyahu,
You didn't get
ma
it.
lacha po. Is this really your mountain? And meaning, is this really what this mountain represents? Did you forget about the Kol Dmama Daka? Did you forget about the Yugam Mitzvot Rachamim here? And that was only one side of the mountain. But Moshe, here in this Ma'ara, discovered and called out with another expression of God. So Eliyahu, why are you here? Are you really here for zealotry? To have the people die? Or are you here because you want to ask for rachamim? So Hashem, once again, is trying to retransform Eliyahu. I even like to use the term rehabilitate Eliyahu as a true Navi, like Moshe. Why do I say a true Navi? Because a true Navi, explain Chazal, has two roles. On one hand, he's supposed to be Tovea Kvod Ha'ab. He's supposed to demand the honor of, who's the father figure of Hashem. On the other hand, he also has to be Tovea Kvod Haben. He also has to support the Ben. He has to support Am Yisrael. So Eliyahu, are you getting it or are you not getting it? Thank you so much for protecting my honor, but guess what? That's not what this mountain is about. This mountain is about protecting Am Yisrael's honor. So why are you here? So let's take a look, and with this we'll end this evening, let's take a look at some of the explanations. Really, even before Eliyahu's answer, right? But certainly with Eliyahu's answer, why then specifically go to Chorev, which is exactly what Hashem asked him. What are you doing here, Eliyahu? As if to say that the role of the prophet is, and now the Malbim is focusing on what are you doing here. Where should you be? Up north with the people. You're supposed to be prophesying. You're supposed to have an impact. You're not supposed to go into seclusion. You're not supposed to give up. You're not supposed to say, no, again, I'm Yisrael, just like can't get their act together, so I give up. No. Again, and Eliyahu says, well, again, Hashem, I tried it. I tried your method of being a Navi who educates. I was in, the hardest Mamlachti school, and I gave my time, and enough. Again, I can't do this anymore because basically my zealotry over their evil acts is doing what? It's physically killing me, right? Meaning they want to kill me now because I did what I could. I executed the Nevi'im of Baal, but now in response, and why does Malbim say they want to kill me? No, it's only Izebel. No, it's everyone. How do you know that? No one stood up and protested Izebel's initiative. No one protested this death threat on Eliyahu. No one got up to stop her. So basically, and he says, I can't continue with my mission. Why does Eliyahu then go to Har Chorev? And here there's another idea that goes back to what Tanya said. Har Chorev is really how the Sneh is first mentioned, right, as by Har Chorev. This is where national prophecy began. What is Eliyahu doing?
He must have ended.
Very nice. How many, I can't do this for many more years, I already see this. How many of you have seen Superman, not 1, we already made reference to Superman 1 and the train scene, Superman 3.
Oh, the cave?
With Kol HaKavod, thank you. In Superman 3, and what's his name? Clark, thank you. And marries Lois Lane. And while they're in Canada on their honeymoon, she realizes when he gets something out of the fireplace and his hand is perfectly fine, she realizes that he's Superman and he's willing to give up his superpowers. So what does he do? How do you discontinue being Superman? He goes to the cave where the kryptonite was, basically where the kryptonite satellite had crashed, and he returns the original power strip that his father had given him, and he throws it into the crater. And now he's mortal man. Bemet, that story is completely based on Malachim Aleph Parakut. No question. Who else would have thought of this?
Able to see the scene any other way.
Nahum. Definitely. It was. So Eliyahu, if Eliyahu wants to basically say Hashem, national prophecy isn't working, which by the way is remarkable because he's right. This is the first time ever that he has to fight against an entire undermining of religious philosophy. No one is on his side. Can you imagine? He doesn't have, any religious parties to support him. It's really him against everyone. He says, God, forget about Nevuah. Right? I hereby resign from Nevuah. What's the best way to resign from national prophecy? Go back to where it started. Wow. Here's the
He got
Maggid.
his way in a way, just many years later.
Sorry?
He got his way.
So we'll talk about it. Did he really? So we're going to see, can one, this is going to obviously raise a phenomenal question of prophecy. Can one resign from prophecy? Pretend you don't know Yonah. Can one resign? Anna, that's an excellent question. So as Javi said, we'll have to see. I don't know what happens here. By the way, there's another similar scene. When there is someone to whom Hashem says, the people are so terrible that I'm depriving you of the power of speech of a prophet, right? Meaning that's the tool of a prophet, to speak. Who does Hashem do this to? Yechezkel. During the time, this is even a little after Yirmiyahu, the people are so terrible. So how do you remove the power of speech of a prophet? You go back to the place where speech began. Where did speech begin? See this week's parsha. Where did speech begin? Language, the expression of language. I shouldn't say speech. It started in Migdal Babel, called the Bik'at Shinar. Where does Hashem take Yechezkel in order to remove his power of expression? He takes him back to the Bik'ah in Babel. So now we see, you'll never look at Parshat Noach the same way again either, Be'ezrat Hashem. And what we're going to continue with next week is Be'ezrat Hashem exactly in 2 weeks. Thank you, in 2 weeks. If you take a look, Jess, and with this will end, the Mechoted Rabbi Yishmael basically explains that why did Eliyahu go to Har Chorev? As we said, there are 3 different types of prophets. There are those who defend the honor of the Father and the Son. That's really the perfect balance of a Navi. There are those who defend the honor of the Father but not the Son, and there are those that defend the honor of the Son but not the Father. Yirmiyahu defended both, and as we said, that's why he was able to have extra prophecy. Eliyahu defended Hashem but not Am Yisrael, Kano Kiniti La Hashem. And interestingly, Chazal actually say, ironically, that Yonah defended Am Yisrael, and that's why he didn't want to deliver the message to Nineveh. So why are you here, Eliyahu? This is a place that is both. It's true. It's a place of the honor of Hashem. Hashem is a Kel Kana, but Hashem is also a Kel Rachum B'Chanun. So why are you here? Are you here for the Kina, or are you here for the Rachamim? And Eliyahu says, I'm only here for one side of the deal. What is Hashem going to say? It doesn't work that way. That's exactly it. Shvo'ayim tovim, may we hear v'sorot tovot, v'shalot v'nechamot be'ezrat Hashem. So if everyone can also bring these in 2 weeks, if not to worry, we have more copies. Yes, that's Rian. Thank you. So, was anyone tired? Excellent. Just making sure. Not phone? Not okay.
As soon as I saw that, and it's right there. It's later.
Yes. And you're right. Meaning that means
It's a good reason to come back.